Towers that debuff bloons are essential to late game runs, but how you should crosspath them, buff them and place them to get the maximum out of your debuff towers and what debuffs stacks with each other, that's what we will be covering in this video. Stick around. Let's start with the super brittle. It causes bloons to take +4 damage for 3 seconds. Going for the 5-2-0 gives you a faster attack rate and causes the debuff to last longer. Meanwhile the 5-0-2 gives you more range. Also worth mentioning is that the refreeze upgrade for the 5-0-2 is actually not needed to reapply the debuff to a bloon that already has the debuff. So which crosspath is best for super late game? We're going to test that and what position is best for the super brittle on logs. If you haven't seen my recent resort versus logs video, we concluded that logs is actually the better map for super brittle and also the best overall map for super late game. We're going to test a total of 12 positions and all but one we will test for both crosspaths, for a total of 23 tests. The super brittle will be buffed by a 0002 True Sun God, Permabrew and a primary expertise, and we will have a 005 sniper for damage testing. We will be doing these tests on the highest round that I've made it to so far, which is 477, because the faster the bads go by, the more percentual uptime the debuff will have, and we want this to be as similar as possible to an actual game. And these are the results. There's a lot of numbers here, so if you want to look at everything in detail you can go ahead and pause here and go back to when I showed all the positions. But the results are clear. When you have a well buffed super brittle, the extra range of the 502 is better in every single test. And as for the top positions, here are the best 3. Putting your super brittle right in between the top middle and far left of the water is the best. When you place it here, it will give a 100% uptime on the debuff for bads at this round as soon as they reach this curve and all the way until they exit. How we're gonna implement this position in an actual game we'll get to soon, but first let's talk about stacking. The 4th upgrade for the top path Ice Monkey is Embrittlement, which gives a debuff that causes bloons to take +1 damage for 2 seconds. Attacks a little slower but has the same range as the tier 5. And this one actually stacks with the tier 5, so you can have a total of +5 damage from them together. So where would we want to place this one with the best spot already taken? Well, we can't use the spots ranked just below the best spot, because those spots are taken up by the VTSG. The best spot left over is this one right here. This is the one you want to use. And you might wonder, how are we even going to fit the super brittle with the VTSG being placed in the center? This is how. First we get our nav arc in the bottom right corner and then create our VTSG as close to the center as we can. We will then be able to place the super brittle on the left helipad of the nav arc, which will be located just where we want it to be. And I've seen people asking in the comments about using absolute 0 to increase the attack speed of the brittles. And from my testing it's not really going to make a difference. You will already have all kinds of buffs, ultra boosts and things like homeland defense and even powers if you're using that. So it already attacks fast enough, so I wouldn't waste any space for an absolute 0 and a tech bot for it. Now let's move on to the glue. Both Glue Strike and Glue Storm causes bloons to take +2 damage, but while the Glue Strike only applies the glue once to everything on the screen, the Glue Storm applies it every 2 seconds for 15 seconds, and the glue also lasts longer. Things to note is that you do need to crosspath it as a 250 for the debuffs to be able to work on MOAB class balloons. And that the glue rain animation only lasts for about 10 seconds, but it still continues to apply the glue for 15. As for the placement, you want it to be somewhere it doesn't take up any valuable space, so for example in the corners of the map or behind any hollow log. You also want to place it within the range of a primary expertise to lower the cooldown for the ability. If you have it in the range of a primary expertise and you have an energizer, plus the global ability cooldown's monkey knowledge, the cooldown for the ability goes from 30 seconds down to 18.624, meaning an uptime of 80.5% according to these calculations using the wiki numbers. but counting the frames in my editing software I got it to 17.43 seconds and an 86% uptime. But either way, keep in mind that this is just the uptime for the actual ability being active. The glue and the debuff stays for a lot longer after the ability is finished. So about 90% of the bloons on the screen will have the debuff at 100% uptime anyway. Given the great uptime and the fact that unlike Embrittlement and superbrittle, Glue Storm and Glue Strike does not stack with each other, I would not use any space to get a Glue Strike, just get the Glue Storm and you are ready to go. And in terms of buffs, you don't need to buff it with anything except for the primary expertise. And lastly, the Cripple MOAB. It causes bads to take plus 5 damage for 0.75 seconds. Let's start with the crosspaths. The 502 gives you a faster fire rate, meanwhile the 520 gives you shrapnel that flies off the bloon you hit and can thus damage other bloons behind it. So the obvious first question is, does the shrapnel also give the debuff? And yes, it does, but only for about 66% of the 0.75 seconds on the main target. So that's 0.495 seconds debuff on the secondary targets. And this is by far the best option, given the large amount of fairly compact bads in late game, plus the fact that the track on logs crosses itself many times, causing the shrapnel to hit a lot of bloons. And as for the fire rate, we want this to be as high as possible. Even though you will have 100% uptime on the main target, you also want to maximize your uptime on the others. Plus, even if you manage a fire rate that is so high you have 100% uptime on secondary target, you will still benefit from having an even higher fire rate, because that may cause you to hit more secondary targets. So you want to ultra boost this tower to the fullest and give it all other possible boosts. And remember that having an elite sniper buffs the attack speed of all snipers by 33%. And now for the placement. Given that the shrapnel comes out in the form of a 45-degree cone shape at an angle depending on where the sniper shoots from, we can understand that we want to place it on the right side of the map, since from there we will have most bloons behind the main target for the most amount of time. If we were to place it on the left side, the shrapnel would fly off into the distance until the bloons have made it through half the track, and then we would have secondary targets behind the main. And by the same reasoning, we also want to place the sniper on the bottom part of the map instead of the top. And of course we want our sight to be blocked by logs as little as possible. With this reasoning, you can find the best area without even doing any testing. It's right here. Although I did test a bunch of other areas anyway, but this was the best. So where exactly should we place it within this area? We have some room to move the sniper up and down and even slightly left to right. These three options seems to offer the most benefit. The benefit of number 1 is that it will most often shoot at a greater angle and hit more bloons. The benefit of number 2 is that it can just about see through this log, so it does not retarget to another bad and thus may hit more bloons in this area. The benefit of number 3 is that it will shoot in a straight line towards the end of the track as the bloons are heading towards the sniper. Testing this with the Cripple MOAB gave some variance, so I decided to use a 024 sniper to pick up the attack speed a bit. And this was the result. Number 1, the bottom position, won it. So that's it. That's all the debuff towers, all the right crosspaths, all the buffs they need and all the best positions for them. The perfect debuff setup for logs. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something to improve your game. Like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more content like this, and I will see you next time.